Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, and thank you for attending my session today at Teams Day Online. And today I'm going to be talking to you about protecting your Microsoft Teams environment with Teams policies. Before we get started, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about me. So my name is Peter Rising. I work as a principal consultant in the public cloud team for a UK partner called Softcat PLC. You can reach me in a number of ways. I'm not hard to find on Twitter and LinkedIn, or all over social media, really. And I'm on the Microsoft tech community quite a fair bit as well, if any of you ever get on there. In addition to that, I'm the author of and co-author of a couple of books, M365, M500 Exam Guide, and the MSS 700 Exam Guide. But anyhow, on to Teams policies. So one of the first things you need to really have in place when you're rolling out Teams is policies, and understanding how these work in relation to the various services within Teams is absolutely crucial. And there are a number of ways that you can implement policies across meetings and messaging in Microsoft Teams. And this example here relates specifically to meetings, and which we'll delve into quite specifically in this session. So let's just check I haven't skipped a slide. No, I haven't. Excuse me. So go ahead, yeah. I'm going to skip forward to this slide and come back to the other one. That's thrown me a bit because those slides are sort of back to front. So what we're going to cover today in this session, we're going to have a little walk through just a few slides. There's not many slides. We're going to go mainly into demo, and we're going to look in the Teams Admin Center to show you how policies can be configured across the various areas within the Teams Admin Center. We're going to look at meetings, meeting policies and settings, and explain the differences between those and how you can apply them. We're going to look at Teams policies themselves, which are very basic. We're going to look at messaging policies that can configure the settings that control chats and instant messaging for the users who have access to Teams. And also we'll touch on policy packages a little bit as well. And finally, we'll talk about Teams apps and how permissions policies and setup policies come into play within apps for Microsoft Teams. But we're going to start with meetings. And just to go back to the previous slide, when it comes to meetings, there are three different implementation types for deploying Teams policies, and these are per organizer, per user, and you can have a mixture of per organizer and per user as well. So on a per organizer level, these come into play when you implement a per organizer policy. All meeting participants inherit that policy of the organizer. So an example of that would be when automatically admitting people is a per organizer policy. It controls whether users join the meeting directly or wait in the lobby. Then you have per user. So when you implement a per user policy, only the per user policy applies to restrict certain features for the organizer and or meeting participants. An example of that, allow Meet Now in channels. That would be a per user policy. So when you're a channel and you see that Meet Now button at the top, that is going to be there on a per user basis. And then there's a combination of the two. So when you implement a combination of per organizer and per user policies, certain features are going to be restricted for meeting participants based on their policy and the organizer's policy. An example of that, allow cloud recording is a per organizer and a per user policy. So turn on this setting to allow users to stop or start a recording. So these apply specifically to meeting policies. Skipping back ahead to the next slide, there are other policies within Teams. We're not going to drain all the policies within Teams. For the purposes of this session, we're going to look specifically at meetings, at messaging, at apps, and the Teams policies. But these are some of the other policies that you can put in place as well across the other services within Teams. Obviously, the ones we're going to talk about here are included: the meeting, messaging, live events, app permission policy, and app setup policies. Then there's some other policies that you can put in place as well. If you're using voice and telephony within Teams, you can configure things like call park policies and calling policies, and a few other things there as well. Okay, so that is the limit of the slide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly come out, and I am going to just stop sharing a second and reshare. And I'm just going to share my whole screen because it's not playing with me. Da, da, da. Here we go. Oh, and the perils of live demoing. It's logged me out of my demo. Please bear with me a second. I'll just get back into my demo environment and we'll get into our Teams Admin Center. Okay. All right, there we go. Back into the Teams Admin Center. And I'm just going to double check that I'm still sharing. Yes, I am. So 1 second. There we go. Can everyone see the Teams Admin Center, by the way? Is that coming across okay, Nikki?
Yes, it's coming across fine.
Amazing, thank you. It just didn't have the red around it, so I just wanted to double check I wasn't talking and and it wasn't there. Thank you so much. Okay, so Teams Admin Center. This is a demo tenant, the good old Contoso Electronics demo tenant that we have in place, and this is our dashboard. In order to access the Teams Admin Center, you need to have the appropriate access, which will be Team Service Administrator or Global Administrator will get you access to this as well. So let's have a walk through the Admin Center in relation to Teams and policies, and we're going to start within the Teams section here down on the left and look at Teams policies. Now, this is a very, very basic setting. And what you find with all policies throughout Teams, as we go through, you'll see a recurring pattern, and that out of the box, you have some predefined policies in place. And these are the global org-wide default policies. So every section where there's policies, you're going to see one of these in place already. And by default, all users who are Teams users will be assigned to one of these global org-wide default policies. And we'll show you what that looks like in a moment. But so these are in place. These are not custom policies. And if we go into it, we can see there are very, very basic settings in here for actual Teams policies. And all this is doing is it's allowing or not allowing the ability for users to create private channels. Seems a very basic thing to have in place, but that is there for that purpose. So, and if you hover over here, it tells you exactly what that's going to do. So you can create private channels for a specific group of users in your organization, and only those people that are added to that private channel will be able to see and write messages. So if you want to have a different setting in place for this global one, what you could do is you could toggle this off. You can make changes to the global org-wide default policy. Some people don't like doing that. Some people like leaving those as they are, and creating specific custom policies and assigning users or groups to those policies. Other people argue that it's better practice to use the global ones as the default and have them set at the most restrictive, and then widen things out with other policies. I tend to think there's no right or wrong way of doing it, and that you find what works best for your organization. My own personal preference would tend to be to work from other policies and assign those as need be, and keep the global one pretty much as is in most situations. So if you wanted to go ahead and create a specific policy, very easy to do. You just click on the add button here, and we can put in another Teams policy here. So no private channels. And we can put in a description if we want to. we'll just skip that for the purposes of this, and then we can toggle this off and click apply. So now we can see we've got another policy in here for Teams, which is no private channels. This one is a custom policy, and we can see here the ability to create private channels is set to off. And that is the extent of what you can do from within the policy itself. Now, by default, all users within Teams are going to have this global org-wide policy. And we can see this if we quickly switch to users. I'll show you what it looks like for users. If we pick on Alex Wilbur here, for example, we can go into Alex's user object and we can see here the policy section. And here we are. Everything at the moment out of the box is all global org-wide default policy for meetings, for messages, for live events, and importantly, Teams. This is the one that we've set up here in the Teams policy section. So we can actually go into this from here and take a look and see exactly what that's doing. And there we go. We can see that the Teams it takes us back in to that policy section from there. So if we wanted to change that, if we wanted to assign to a group of users a different Teams policy, this new one here, for example, we can easily do that by the group policy assignment option here. So here, if we select this tab, we can add in a Microsoft 365 group and add that in. If I add in one called SOC team, which I happen to know in the list there, I can click on add. And here you'll see there's a ranking system. Now, this is important. If you assign via group one or more policies to a user, or then you can apply a rank to that policy to determine which one has priority. So the highest number, in this case 1, will be the one that takes precedence. So we can set the policy here, and we've only got one other choice because that's the only other one set up. So we'll select no private channels. That's going to be assigned to the SOC team, and we can go ahead and click on apply. So that is done now, and we should be able to see quite quickly. Well, we can see the assignment there. We can see what we've got in place, and its rank. If we add in another setting, we could configure more ranking in that list. If we go back to the users, we know that Alex Wilbur was not potentially in that group, but one user that I do know is in that group that I picked is Lydia Holloway. So if we click on Lydia as an example in this case, we could actually just click on view policies from right within the screen there. You might have just seen as well, but two different ways of getting to the same thing. And now we've got a lovely spinning wheel. Okay. Oh, here we go. There is Lydia. And if we select her policies, then now for Teams policy, we can see here that Lydia has no private channels group as her Teams policy. And you'll see this little details section to the right of it there. So that details section is an indicator within the user's policies that they are receiving policies in some way, shape or form from a group. So if you click on those details there, you can see how and which policy is dynamically getting applied. So here we're getting policy inherited from groups is no private channels. Policies directly assigned to the user is none. And then further down would be the global org-wide default policy. So some other settings that were put in place earlier were from a policy package, which I put in place a bit earlier today. And this policy package will appear on each user if there's one assigned to them. You can assign it from here, or you can assign it from policy packages, and we'll get to that as we go through. But these explain this setting here, and whenever anything has been assigned via a group or dynamically in some way, you'll see these details here for the assigned policies. So that is Teams policies. Next, very briefly, we'll not dwell on this one too much because but it's important to mention. Update policies have been around for a while now, and you can use these to manage the preview features that can be applied to users for when they will see pre-release or preview features in the Teams app. So the global org-wide policy here has the preview feature set to off. So again, a very simple, much like the Teams policies, a toggle feature on or off. So if you had a group of users that you wanted to apply preview features to, you could quite easily set up a preview features policy here and have this toggle to on. So that's set up there. We can edit that, and then we can assign people to this from the actual users section. Now you will find as you're going through policies there is occasionally some inconsistencies in how you can apply policies to users. Sometimes, as in the Teams policies, you have this option to do a group policy assignment. Other times you don't have that there. It may be that will come in future iterations, future updates of Teams, but you will notice there are some differences there in how that the policies can be applied to the end users. So that's a quick look at Teams policies and also update policies. Now next, majority of what takes place in Teams, certainly in the last year of living in pandemic times, is inevitably meetings. We're all on Teams meetings quite a lot, way more often than we were. And it was already something that was very, very heavily used, but now more so than ever. Important feature, and also meeting settings, and I'll quickly explain the difference between the two things, because this also can create a little bit of confusion sometimes. What's the difference between the policies and the settings? Well, basically the policies, you can create a number of policies and to different groups of users, but the meeting settings will apply to all users within Teams. So there's no choice here. There's only one set of meeting settings, and these apply to everybody. But the meeting policies are more options in there to set them towards groups and users. The settings here, there are things you can configure here in terms of can anonymous users join a meeting? Can they interact with apps in Teams? There's the ability here to set logos and legal URLs and help URLs for the email invitation when you're setting up your meetings. You can preview that invite there to see what that's going to look like once you've put in your links. And then the final option for the meeting settings here is quality of service. Now, this is something that you should consider putting in place and toggle to on if you're having some performance issues, if you're getting jitter in Teams meetings and poor video quality. Look at implementing that and setting that up, putting some of those settings in place to help with those sort of things. But these will apply across your entire Teams organization. The meeting policies, however, is a different story. And you can see in this tenant here, which is a brand new tenant, a brand new demo tenant, as I said, was just created today. In fact, we've got the global org-wide default policy in here, as we have in other areas within the Teams admin center, but we've also got some other options in place as well, which could be assigned to users. And we can, again, here and in this instance, assigned by group policy. So let's take a quick look at what's in a meeting policy. We'll look at the global org-wide default and go through. So this is split up into a few sections, and the top one is general, and very, very easy to toggle things on and off. You can allow the ability to meet now within channels, so that when you're in a channel, you'll see in the Teams app at the top the Meet Now button. That can be controlled within policy, and you can have that on or off within the different policies. The same thing for the Outlook add-in. So when you're in your Outlook and you'll see the new Teams meeting option from within Outlook, this controls whether that is available to the user. Allow channel meeting scheduling, whether the ability to schedule a meeting is there, which appears near that Meet Now button within the channels, and the ability to allow scheduling of private meetings as well. So there's lots of controls there that experience. And then we've got more settings here for audio and video specifically, whether or not you want to allow transcription within Teams meetings. So that is the as I'm talking right now, if that was on, if you flick that on, you would get the text of what I'm saying, and that works really well. Actually, it tends to pick up on most people quite successfully. Allow cloud recording. So a lot of meetings, there's a need to record them for various reasons, for compliance, for I use that quite a lot in some of my scoping calls as a consultant to go back and take notes because it's quite difficult sometimes to actually jot things down whilst listening and talking on a call. So that's quite a useful feature there. And then there's modes for IP video and IP audio, whether or not you're going to allow video, NDI streaming, which is a technology to capture and deliver broadcast quality audio over your network. So lots of audio and video settings you can configure per policy there. Lots of good stuff. Now, a couple of good examples of where you might want to have different policies for these sort of features. Cloud recording, IP video, for example, you might want to turn these features off for users who potentially have lower bandwidth, lesser performing internet connections, and just to make their team's experience a bit better for them. So you could try and put that in place in a policy to try and improve their experience. Or there might be compliance reasons why you would take away those features from a particular group of users as well. But very easy to toggle on and off there. Content sharing, again, is another set of settings which can be controlled with policies. Screen sharing mode, we have the ability here in the policy to allow the sharing of the entire screen, a single application, or whether you're going to disable that altogether. It may be that you want a policy targeted towards groups of users that does not allow screen sharing. Controls over whether a participant is able to give or request control. That can be granted or taken away with policy. Allow an external participant to do the same. Allow sharing of PowerPoint presentations, allow the whiteboard feature, and allow shared notes. Video settings here as well, which importantly gets mentioned here, that aren't available for all Teams clients just at the moment, but you can choose the video filter selections here for no filter or background blur only, or whether you want background blur and default images or all filters. All filters is the default. And then the final section in the meeting policies is the participant and guest experience. So the first one here is let anonymous people start a meeting. Now, this is off by default, and probably a good idea, I guess, by default to have that turned off, because you don't really want anonymous guests starting the meeting in most cases, I would say. Then we have a section for roles that have presenter rights within the meeting. So here you can control who can do what within the meeting, but a user can override. Organizers, but users. So there's some choices there in terms of what can be done with those sort of things. Automatically admitting people to meetings. So you can make a selection there who gets automatically admitted to meetings. So is that going to be people in my organization and guests? Do you want that to be everyone, or whatever selection you want to make there? And then there is the choice here to whether you're going to allow dial-in users to bypass the lobby or not. So that is off by default, and you would tend to think in most cases that would remain so. So these are handy little info points as well in the settings here within the meeting policies, where you can get a little bit more information about what these settings are going to do for you. Allow Meet Now in private meetings, whether that is on or off, and enable live captions as well. Within meetings, some choices there, whether that's disabled or with an override, or just purely disabled. And then not sure if there's too many use cases for this, but allow chat in meetings. I mean, we're in a meeting right now, and the chat will be used potentially for Q&A and general chat. So there's not often going to be a case for turning that off, I would say, but I have come across it. There are occasions when customers have wanted to do that. So, but there's a lot of control there over the settings that you can control with policies. So that's a quick look through the meeting policies and the sort of things that you can put in place. Now, again, here are some examples of some ones that have been pre-provided in the tenant. So there's a healthcare clinical worker policy that is here. This is a custom policy. We can see here there's exactly the same settings, but just a few different choices have been made. And if we click cancel there, we can then go into individual users from the user section and assign these policies to the different areas within the user, or we can apply these via group policy as well in the case of meeting policies. So this is one I did earlier on this afternoon to the same group that we did with the Teams policies earlier in the demonstration, and I targeted to the SOC team the healthcare clinical worker policy package. So in this case, that was a policy package which I leveraged from further down, which we'll take a look at in a few moments, which is why this says it's a custom policy. All of these are baked in. These ones come out of the box, but from policy packages or any that you manually add yourself, you're going to see those as custom policies. So the same principle applies to live events as well. So live events, bit different from Teams, Teams meetings, obviously, in that Teams meetings are more collaborative. Live events are more a broadcast tool, a town hall experience, a one-to-many experience, and participants have less control within live events. Well, hardly any control, but you can change those settings here with live events policies. And multiple policies created, and again the settings, and much as in the case of meetings settings, the live event settings are set per Teams environment, per Microsoft 365 environment. There are less settings in here for live events. In fact, there's only a couple. You can set a support URL that your users can get access to if they need support during a live event. So you can put in place a link to where you want them to be directed. And the other thing that you can do with live event settings is if the built-in video distribution from Microsoft is not going to be suitable for your needs, then you can use a third-party distribution provider, a content provider. And if you toggle that on, the delivery network providers that are baked in, there are 3 at the moment: Hive, Collective, and Riverbed. So that is something that you may want to consider putting in place if you've got very large numbers of users joining live events, and various other scenarios might come into play for that as well. So that is the live event settings. So not a huge amount in there. We can just discard any changes that we've made there. And let's take a look at the live events policies. So once again, I have similar options here in the live events policies in order to be able to turn on or off features such as who can join a live event, and we can choose whether or not we're going to do this via group policy assignment again, or we can just go in and assign these at a user level. Let's take a look at the global org-wide default policy here once again. And for live events, there's not too many settings in play as compared to meeting policies. So very little here. But what we have is the ability to allow or disallow scheduling. So we can toggle that one on or off. We can enable or disable transcription for attendees. Again, very easy to switch these on and off. And then have some controls put in place with the live event policy over who can join any scheduled live events, whether that's going to be everyone, everyone in your organization, or you can narrow that down to a specific users or groups. So then the final thing, who can record an event? Options here for always record is so if there's an event taking place, it's always going to be recorded. Never record, or the organizer can record the event. So not so much in place for live event policies and settings as there are for meetings, but There's a fair bit that you can control there. So we'll discard those settings as well. Again, group policy, we can do the same as we did for meeting policies. We can go in and if we need to, we can add a group and then select a ranking. If there's going to be a number of groups that we're going to select, we can have those in order of priority and then select the policy and apply that, much as we did for the meeting policies where we assign that to the SOC team. Okay. So that takes us out of the meetings section of the Teams Admin Center. So next on the list is going to be messaging policies. Now, for messaging policies, these are going to control the features that are available to your users in Teams in relation to chat and channel messaging features that are going to be available to them. Again, global org-wide default is going to be in play if there's nothing else that you've specifically put in place, either manually or via group policy assignment or via policy packages. But let's take a look at messaging policies and the sort of features that you can put in place for these. So we'll click on the global org-wide default again. And there's a lot of controls here for what can and can't be done with messaging policies within Microsoft Teams. So here we can control with the toggle switches, can owners delete sent messages on or off, delete sent messages in general on or off, can sent messages be edited on or off? So once you've sent a message, can you go back in and edit that? I very much in favor of having that on, purely for the fact that I don't know about you, but when in Teams chat, a really great new feature that's been around for a while now probably is if you make a mistake in your message, you're all typing away quite quickly and you hit enter before you've checked it and I've made a spelling mistake. If you just hit the up arrow on your keyboard, you can edit your message. So really handy feature, but if this one is off, you're not going to be able to do that. Read receipt controls here, we can have some decisions here by a policy, what's going to happen there, whether these are user controlled, off for everyone or on for everyone. Chat, whether you want users to chat or not. I actually spoke to a customer not that long ago where there was a use case for them to only have Teams for video meetings. They did not want the chat feature available to them within messages and potentially within meetings as well. We did sort of touch on that in the meeting policies where I said I don't know why you would turn that off, but I did actually have a customer who wanted to do that. So that's how you could do that. But as a rule, I tend to try and avoid recommending turning everyday settings like chat off within Teams, and that comes from really Microsoft's guidance that they want Teams to be used as openly and as effectively and collaboratively as possible, and turning off chat does seem to be very, very contrary to that. But every organization has their own individual policies and compliance standards that they have to adhere to, so it may be that needs to be done, and this is an example of how you could do that. You can toggle off this setting here and turn off the chat within Teams messages. Giphies, if you want to take all the fun out of messaging within Teams, you can use Giphies in conversations or not. Giphy content rating, here's an interesting one. You can choose whether the rating of the Giphies is strict, moderate, or no restrictions at all. Giphies are hugely popular within Teams, I find, especially when I do Teams workshops. Quite often these are attended by very senior leadership team members within organizations, and invariably they are the ones who have the most fun playing with the Giphies. You wouldn't believe it, but that happens to me so often. Memes and conversations, whether you can use memes on or off, stickers on or off, whether you're going to allow the ability to have URL previews. So if there's a URL in a chat, you hover over that, you can see the the preview. Translation of messages on or off, allow an immersive reader experience for viewing messages, you can control that. The ability to send messages using priority notifications, so this is something you can also toggle on and off. So when you turn this on, users will be able to send urgent messages in the Teams app, So some organizations, again, might turn that off because that can be seen as a bit intrusive or in your face, if you like. Not everybody likes that sort of thing, but again, that's going to be on an organizational basis. The ability to create voice messages within chats as well. So is this going to be allowed, and if so, how so? So allowed in chats and channels, chats only, or disabled completely. And the ability to remove users from group chats as well. That can be disabled or enabled. Sorry, wrong one there. That can be toggled on or off. And then suggested replies as well. So this one here, when you turn this on, users will get suggested replies for their chat messages. Not everybody likes that, so by policy that can be turned on or off as well. So that is the global org-wide default and the run through of the settings that are part of that non-customized policy. Here's an example of that healthcare policy package that was applied earlier as well, with a few different settings in place. So you can see exactly the same settings, but just a few different choices within there. Group policy assignment, once again, the same principle. You can add groups into here, other groups. So we could quite easily add in another group here of SG retail, for example, add that in, rank number 2, policy name, and healthcare clinical worker. We've only got those 2 choices in there at the moment, but you could add in other choices. So that is messaging. So just a brief recap. We've been through Teams policies, we've been through a little bit of user settings, and we'll probably come back to that in a little bit before we wind up. We've been through meeting policies, live event policies, and also the settings for meetings and live events. And we've taken a look at messaging policies as well. Now, a couple more things to go through before we conclude the talk. And this would be Teams apps and a quick look at policy packages. So apps is probably the most important thing to be mindful of in terms of policies and settings when you're setting up Teams. And I'll explain why this is so important. If you do nothing else, I always tell my customers when setting up Teams, if you're not going to do anything with Teams meeting policies or messaging policies, then address apps and make some choices there, because by default apps is wide open for all users within the Teams organization, and you can see that first and foremost before we get into permission policies and setup policies here. If we look at managing apps on an organization-wide basis, there are some choices here on what is going to be allowed in your organization. If we click on that, we can control what sort of apps your users are going to be able to use within the organization. And the 3 choices are third-party apps on or off, allow any new third-party apps published to the store by default to be on or off, and then custom apps as well. So third-party apps are exactly that. These are apps produced by other non-Microsoft parties, which you'll see in the list here. So under the publisher, anything that doesn't say Microsoft there is going to be either a third-party app or a custom app. A custom app is something that you or a developer will produce and create for you yourselves, and you can put that into your app store within Teams in a process which is known as side loading. So here you can control at an organization-wide level what is going to be allowed in terms of third-party or custom apps. Microsoft apps are always going to be allowed at an org-wide level, obviously. But you can make those decisions for the third party and custom apps. So that's at an org-wide level. Then from a policy level, if we look at app permission policies, these control what apps you want to make available to Teams users within your organization. And you can use the global org-wide policy again and customize that, create one or more policies to meet the needs of your organization, much as in the other examples that we've been through so far. So if you want different settings for apps to different groups of people within your organization, within Teams, you can add policies here and assign them as needed. But what does this do? If we go into the global org-wide policy, there are three basic settings essentially on what the users are going to have permission to consume in terms of apps within Teams. So are you going to allow Microsoft apps? You can choose whether that's going to be allowed, allow specific apps and block all others, or block specific apps and allow all others, or block all apps. So there's pretty much every choice you can imagine there. Same principle for third-party apps, apps published by third-party providers. Same decision-making process. Allow specific, block or block specific. And again, for any custom apps that you have produced for yourself and sideload into Teams. So very, very basic decision-making process there in terms of what you want to allow. Now, the reason I said apps and app permission policies are so important, if you do nothing else than put these in place, is that if you are rolling out Teams in your organization and you don't necessarily want users running before they can walk, they're going to be able to go in there, and users can be curious by nature. They're going to be able to go in there and install any app. They're going to be able to sideload apps. They're going to be able to put third-party apps in there, and you've got app sprawl all over the place. So what I tend to recommend as a good general rule of thumb is to start with a crawl, walk, run approach. Maybe only allow Microsoft apps to begin with and start easing out that as you roll out Teams within the organization. Third-party apps, start allowing specific ones as you go to control that, just to keep a measure of control over that experience. Definitely an important thing to do. Setup policies, so app setup policies here. So here we can control how apps are made available to users within the Teams app. So again, there's a global org-wide default. There's a couple of other non-custom custom ones set up here and non-custom ones set up here. But if you go into here, this is going to control the experience on that people apply, this policy applies to, what that looks like within their Teams apps. So there's a couple of things at the top here within the Teams apps. Can they upload custom apps on or off? So from the Teams app, if this is on, they're able to do that from the app. If not, then they can't. Allow user pinning. Can they pin users within Teams on or off? Installed apps, which apps are going to be installed for users as part of this setup policy. So you can choose here the apps that you want the users to have. So search based on this app permission policy. So you can, if there are other ones in there, you can toggle to there, and then search for apps that you want to add or see a list. You could go in and add, search for Evernote, for example. You could add that in there and say that everyone in the global policy that we're editing here is going to get Evernote if they're part of that policy. Then there's pinned apps. Now, these are the things that you'll see in the Teams client, the Teams app, the app rail down the left, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. When you launch Teams, the Teams app, or via the browser, teams.microsoft.com, on the left, you're going to see activity, chat, Teams, calendar. Here is where you can control that experience on a policy basis. So I always think, for example, the activity, that seems a bit weird to me personally, that is at the top. I might like Teams itself to be at the top or chat to be at the top. Activity just seems wrong to me, but I get why it might be there. But here you can change the order of what's where, so you can move things up or down, and you can add apps to that rail as well. So if you want something to be permanently in that app rail per policy, you can go ahead and add those into the pinned apps using the app setup policies. So that's a handy one to know about as well. And finally, just mindful of the time, I will very, very quickly show you the policy packages that are available. So here, I added one of these in earlier, which is why you could see it available for users within meeting policies, and that was the healthcare clinical worker one. So These are collections of settings relevant to certain areas, so education, health, various other sectors that are available. And you can go in and assign these again via group package assignment. So earlier on, I did this to the SOC team again, who I seem to like picking on. We could do the same. We could add to another group. Let's just see if we can pick on something else. So if we go, let's just add in Contoso marketing, and then we could select for them higher education. And when you select the policy package, this is going to show you the policies that will apply within the package. So there's a few more in this one, actually, in this education one. The healthcare one had a few less policies, so you can see here what you're going to get. So then we can apply that. And then the result of that will be pretty quickly that anyone who's a member of those groups is going to get those set of policies. So Contoso marketing is going to get all those settings, and you'll be able to see that if you go into your users and go into their view policies. If they're in that group, then you'll start seeing those details messages to the right of their assigned policies. So that is the end of the actual demonstration. I shall just go back into my Teams, and not that one, but this one. And I shall just go and stop sharing. I'll just wind up with my presentation. And my key takeaways. So, final thoughts, key takeaways. My thoughts on Teams policies is definitely always to start more restrictive and open things up gradually. Always configure org-wide app settings. Start with Microsoft apps only and app permissions policies, and then start rolling things out gradually. Gets you more control over things. And importantly, review your team's policies on a regular basis. So always keep checking on them. The needs are potentially going to change fairly frequently, potentially, but sometimes more than others. But that is the end of my presentation. So I would be very, very happy to open things up for questioning. Sorry, I was a bit disjointed there at the end. I seem to have trouble getting between the various windows, but thank you for your time. And if there's any questions, I'm just having a look in the chat, but please let me know.
Yeah, there's one from Sandra. She wanted to know about auditing for the policies, and were they being tracked at all? So when an admin goes in and makes those amendments, are they in the audit logs?
The audit logs, yeah. I think you've put a reply in there already to a certain extent, haven't you?
Yeah, I put a link into the kind of the link to the audit. I couldn't seem to see in there whether there were everything was being audited.
That's right. The E5, yeah, 90 days for the audit logs. Entirely correct. The advanced auditing, you get much more on that up to 1 year. But you can search the audit logs for various things within Teams. Off the top of my head, I'm struggling to remember exactly how that relates to policies, but I can check that. I can check that and reply somewhere, or maybe even blog about it, because I can't instantly remember the exact answer to that. But that's a very good point. Very good point indeed.
And she also posted up another question about that she had some number of meeting policies that weren't custom ones are being assigned by default to users.
Okay.
And how to check how to fix it and which policies people have got.
So if they are being mysteriously assigned in that way, that tends to suggest that in some way, shape, or form they're being put out there via a group policy selection of some sort. So I would definitely check that. Have a look in the Teams Admin Center under the group policy settings and see if there's anything in there. Hopefully that's what it is. If not, that might be a little bit more complicated. Might be one for a Microsoft support ticket, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking that if you have a particular example of a user, you could actually go in and look at under the Teams Admin Center. You can see the user, and then if you look at their policies, you can see whether they've been directly assigned or whether they've been inherited via a group. So that would address that thing, as if they're kind of being mysteriously assigned because they're part of a security group. So maybe that's another option as well.
That is definitely another option. Yeah, you're absolutely right to point that out. That can be worth a look at, because you're going to see the decision process in there about where the policies are coming from and what the inheritance is, and what those priority numbers are potentially if there's a conflict, which one's going to take precedence there. So yeah, definitely a good thing to do. So check the group policy settings, check the user settings themselves. As you saw as we went through, I jumped around all different areas of the Teams Admin Center. So you find when you click on certain things, it brings you back to other areas. So have a dig around, and you'll find out what you're looking for, no doubt. But if you've got any questions, if you ever want to ask, feel free to reach out to me on at the start of the presentation. I'm not hard to find, so always happy to help. So
Peter, I don't know whether you've got the QR codes at all on one of your presentation slides, whether you wanted to put that up so people can provide feedback.
Oh, right. I actually don't. No, my bad. I didn't.
Let me see.
I didn't do that.
I assume they're all the same. So let me.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I was doing so well. I had my background on. Right. It's the one thing I didn't do.
There you go.
So, there we go.
So
super.
Hopefully they're the same for everyone. So yeah, get your phones out, take a picture, and then yeah, we'd love to get your feedback on the event and the individual sessions.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. And Michael, thank you so much. I appreciate your kind words and the comments there about my book. It's very nice. I should point out it's not just my book, that one. It was co-written with the excellent Nate Chamberlain, fellow MVP. So I can't take all the credit for that one.
And I think the last thing, if there's no more questions, it's that time at the end of the session that if people would like to put their cameras on and join together in a group selfie photo, what I'll do is I'll set it to together mode and share my screen so you can see everybody, and we'll take a picture of everyone. Right. So we've got a camera shy people. It's just the two of us, Peter.
Just us two at the moment.
Oh, well, we just have a picture of the two of us.
Let's do it anyway.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, well, that's the end of the session today, because unfortunately the last session of the day has unfortunately had to cancel. So please feel free to go and look at some of the other sessions that are still running. Or if not, we will see you tomorrow. So if there's no further questions, thank you very much for joining us today on the security track for Teams Day Online. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki.
Great job.
Thank you.